Afternoon and welcome everybody. Thank you very much for attending, whether virtually or otherwise, this briefing. There's nothing to worry about. We've had a briefing recently, but our policy has always been if we've got something to tell you, we'll have a briefing so that A, you can hear it promptly, and B, the media can ask any questions. Now, before we turn to the events which we are here for, sadly, as we know, in recent days somebody died. Condolences go out clearly to the family of the deceased person, and Dr. Brink will say something more of that in due course. So we'll move on from that. But as I say, we're very sorry that the death of that person, and our sympathies are very much and thoughts are very much with the family. Now, what we said at all times, really, in just about every one of these briefings, is that things are flexible and decisions we make can be changed at short effect. Now, we're not changing any decisions, but we do have a variation to what we previously had said, and that variation is not caused by any change of mind on behalf of the Civil Contingency Authority. Tomorrow, we were due to have lateral flow tests at the airport and the harbour, and people were due to pay £25 for them, and they were going to have to take them, and they were going to have 5 of them. Now, through nobody's fault, somebody's seen probably the problems that there are with supply chains from things from the UK, and these lateral flow tests were coming from the UK. They haven't arrived in Guernsey yet. And we're not absolutely certain when they are going to arrive. They might arrive tomorrow, they might arrive the day after. So therefore, we can't expect people to take lateral flow tests when they're not available. So that regime will not be starting tomorrow. And we will, because we want to give certainty to travellers and operators, give good notice when they are here to say in 2 days' time, 3 days' time, or whatever it may be, the test will start. So we apologise for any inconvenience, which is completely out of our making, but nevertheless is something that's occurred. They were supposed to be here on Friday, so allowing, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, that allowed a fair degree of tolerance, but there we go, they've not arrived, and therefore we're sorry about that. Now, also in relation to when they do eventually arrive, there'll be one of two things. Either we'll delay for a few days, as I say, the implementation of the scheme, or alternatively we'll implement it, but because you won't be able to initially set up the payment process, they'll be free of charge till we can set up the appropriate payment process through the travel tracker. Now, also, there's been much talk about Jersey. And the CCA met this morning, early in the morning, to decide what, if any, variation we should make to the pre-travel testing procedure that pertains in Jersey. At the moment, you've got to take a PCR test. Now, we considered whether we should waive that completely and go to the regime, the Blue Channel regime, or whether we should leave it as it was. We decided somewhere in between because of the prevalence rates in Jersey and the contact tracing regime that they have, which is different to ours, and also, of course, the fact that people will travel in quite significant numbers from Jersey to Guernsey and vice versa. So what we've decided is that from tomorrow, you could either take a PCR test or you can take a lateral flow test as long as it's officially supervised. So that will obviously cut down on the cost. But if you don't do that, that's not going to affect people who are have made arrangements, because it's got to be 48 hours before you travel. So those that are travelling in the next 48 hours still have to obey the current rules, but that will soon pass. Now, we're keeping that under review. We will change it when we can change it, but at the moment that's the test that will be necessary, albeit with a variation. We believe, in accordance with the very good advice that we've received, that that's a reasonable step that we can take. Now, I'd like to look a little further ahead, beyond tomorrow, in the next few days. And as I said, we've been saying consistently that we have to, as a community, begin really living responsibly with COVID. Nobody, or at least the majority of people, do not want Fortress Guernsey. Certainly the Civil Contingency Authority doesn't want Fortress Guernsey, and neither does anybody that's advising us. Now, many of you will have seen recently the UK's announcement, which was made last week, that they will begin accepting, I think from 4 o'clock tomorrow morning, a vaccination certification from those travellers who've been fully vaccinated in the European Union and the USA. Now, again, we have considered that position. And what we have decided to do, and again in accordance with the advice that we've received, is that Guernsey will accept vaccination certificates from all EU and European Free Trade Association member states from Monday the 16th of August, in other words, from 2 weeks' time. Now, just for clarity, because not everybody may know who are members of the European Free Trade Association, or EFTA for short, it's Iceland, Norway, Liechtenstein and Switzerland. Now, when we made the changes on the 1st of July, we focused on travel within the common travel area because we had to have a vaccination certificate verification programme. And we knew we could verify those certificates for those fully vaccinated within the CTA. We were awaiting other countries in the EU to have standardised vaccination certificate templates. And now that's happened, and that's why we've made the decision that will be effective from 2 weeks today. We've decided against accepting USA certification at this stage, as we've still not received a standards template. So this and certification for other countries will be kept under regular review, and it may be that we'll be doing them 2 by 2 or 4 by 4, dependent upon when we are satisfied that we can rely upon the vaccination certificates. So therefore, just to repeat, as part of this decision, the CCA has decided that from Monday the 16th of August, 2 weeks from today, any fully vaccinated adult who had their vaccination administered either in the common travel area, the EU or EFTA, will be classified as Category 2 if they've travelled anywhere outside the common travel area in the previous 14 days, as long, and I emphasise this, as they've not spent any time in a country on the UK's red list or are not subject to other restrictions on entry into the UK. Now, just to remind you what Category 2 arrivals do, they take a PCR test on arrival, they isolate until there's a negative result, and then they have a second PCR test on day 7. Category 2 arrivals also must comply with the passive follow-up rules until 14 days after they've arrived here. The CCA's decision significantly reduces isolation requirements for fully vaccinated people who travel to the bailiwick, having spent time abroad, for both visitors and residents. And while we know some in our community might be concerned about that, this is a continuation of the strategy to reduce border restrictions as it becomes proportionate to do so. Now, that's a phrase that is enshrined in the relevant legislation. We can only make decisions that are proportionate. We cannot be overly restrictive if that is disproportionate. So we trust and we must trust our vaccination programme, and the decision we've made reflects that. Now, we decided against including travellers fully vaccinated in the EU and EFTA countries within our bailiwick blue channel, which would have meant travellers receiving lateral flow test packs on arrival, but with no isolation requirement. We took this decision primarily as a result of the continued but manageable risk of variants of concern. So again, just to emphasise, from the 16th of August, the blue channel will remain for those who've been fully vaccinated within the bailiwick, the UK or other common travel area jurisdictions who arrive in the island not having spent time outside the CTA in the previous 2 weeks. Now, we're aware that the UK currently has specific measures in place for France, and we receive daily communications from people who either want to go to France or are in France asking about what we're going to do. Now, should the UK measures remain in place, the CCA will consider the position regarding travellers who spent time in France prior to the 16th of August when these new changes come into effect. But we strongly advise anybody wanting to travel outside the common travel area to closely monitor the rules in the country that they are intending to visit, because there may well be restrictions in relation to their arrivals. That is their responsibility and your responsibility if you're travelling outside the common travel area to ensure that those requirements are known to you. Now, over to you, Dr. Brink.
Thank you so much. And first of all, as Deputy Fairbrush said, it was with great sadness that we had a death in the hospital last week. The person was in their 70s, had serious underlying health conditions, and our thoughts are, as always, with the friends and family at this sad time for them. So I think it's important that we all reflect and think about the friends and family of that person. We do have a second person in hospital at the moment. The second person in hospital is in hospital with COVID, but is not being treated for COVID in the hospital. They're being treated for another medical condition. We're not going to say anything more about that, as I'm sure you will appreciate. But following on from that, just looking at our overall position, so post the second wave, so that's at the end of January, going into February this year, post second wave, we've now had a total of 145 positive cases. And of those, 50 cases are still active, and 95 cases are closed, with the overwhelming majority having recovered. 94 have recovered, but one, as I said, has sadly died. So if we then look at the profile of cases, and there's a lot of interest about vaccinated cases versus unvaccinated cases, and I did a pictogram of that at the last press briefing, but what I did say is I'd keep everyone fully updated on the ratio of vaccinated versus unvaccinated cases. So of the total 145 cases that we've had, 43% have occurred in fully vaccinated cases and 57 in partially or unvaccinated cases. So that number is remaining largely unchanged over the last week or so. But if we go on and specifically look at our vaccination program, I just want to highlight our over 18s, and obviously the figure doesn't quite add up to 92, but there's we adjust for the percentage, and the percentage of double vaccinated is 81%. We've double checked the population levels and looked at the data and removed some duplications, and so 81% of the population are double vaccinated. But of the population over 18 years of age, so that's the adult population. But I wanted to also pause here because I've spent a busy weekend looking at doing contact tracing, working with the contact tracers. And one of the points I'd like to highlight is the benefits of being vaccinated if you are contact traced. So if you are an unvaccinated person and you have contact with a case of COVID, you will go into active follow-up, which means self-isolation. And that at the moment is a period of 14 days. However, if you are a double vaccinated person plus 2 weeks, you don't do 14 days of self-isolation. You'll go into self-isolation until you get a negative result, and then after that you'll be on passive follow-up with some testing. So really important. So if you're a double vaccinated contact of a case whose 2 weeks has passed since their second dose of vaccine, so fully vaccinated, you will not do 2 weeks of self-isolation. You will only self-isolate until you have your first negative result, and after that you'll be on passive follow-up with testing. So a massive difference between those two groups of individuals. The only exception where someone who's double vaccinated goes into self-isolation for 2 weeks if they choose to bubble with a case. So you've then got sustained ongoing daily chance of transmission. But most double vaccinated contacts will not go into 2 weeks of self-isolation. So highlighting those differences I think are important, because having contact traced over the weekend and worked with the contact tracers, there were people who were unaware of the advantage of being vaccinated in relation to self-isolation. So I think an important point for us to highlight and for us all to reflect on. So moving forward, the testing strategy, you know how much I love this diagram. So symptomatic testing, over the last week we've tested 662 symptomatic people. So we're still testing large numbers of symptomatic. We're not finding very many positives, as our numbers reflect. But what it does show us is there are other respiratory viruses out there, but we need to be continually vigilant. And what we're grateful to is that people are starting to realize the very mild symptoms that you're sometimes seeing in Delta, with Delta variant, in younger people and also in double vaccinated people. So that very mild, slightly runny nose, bit of a sore throat, bit of a headache, just having a bit of a cold. And people are coming forward and getting tested, and we are grateful for that. Some people are delaying getting tested and coming forward on day 4 or day 5 of symptoms. That means that we have a whole lot of days of potential contacts of a case. So it's important, if you do have symptoms, to come forward as soon as possible. So we've been doing surge testing this weekend around some of the cases we've identified, and our surveillance testing is ongoing. And so the whole testing program is functioning as we would expect it to. But I was thinking this weekend in the moving forward is, what does moving forward mean to us? So how do we look at this? So first of all, what are going to be our targets from a public health perspective? So of course we want to monitor the antigenic variants, so those are the variants of concern, and look at any vaccine updates that will be required. With that we'll link into the UK and indeed the World Health Organization, because that's something that is wider than the bailiwick itself. But of course we've got our booster vaccination program, so we're teeing up to deliver a booster vaccination program in September, October time. There are 2 phases of the booster vaccination program, and we're going to again align to the Joint Committee of Vaccination Immunisation. Now, the other thing that what we're focusing on, and this is part of our incremental move forward, is that we're looking at reducing the transmission of the virus that causes COVID-19. And all of the things we do look at reducing the transmission. So if you think of our identified cases, the contacts of cases, the surveillance program, so all of those looks at reducing transmission. And indeed, if you look at the introduction of the lateral flow post-arrival for blue travellers, all you're trying to do is identify cases that are more likely to transmit and interrupt or reduce the chain of transmission. So that forms part of the reduction of transmission part of the strategy. But then we look at the variants of concern and what's going on outside of the UK. And part of the policy that we're looking at now with the wider vaccine certification is how we can move forward in an incremental way, but still retain that safety for bailiwick residents. So if you look at what we're doing with the broader certification, is we're looking at bringing the certification into the Category 2 travel. And as Deputy Fairbrush said, that means you change from 14 days of self-isolation down to a test on arrival, isolate till you get a negative result, and a test on day 7. So a significant difference in the period of isolation. But of course, people will rightfully ask us, what about safety? So one of the things that we want to do with that is again aligned to what the UK is doing, is have a sample taken, that original sample, and we'll do PCR on that. Now, the reason why we want to do PCR on that sample is it enables us to genetically fingerprint the virus, so we know exactly what we're dealing with. And that's important. So if you look at the whole strategy, you're looking at the vaccination program, you're looking at the implementation of the booster program, you're looking at how we can reduce transmission within the bailiwick, and you're also looking at how we can protect bailiwick residents from the introduction of variants of concern. Now, the variants of concern that would particularly worry us are ones with reduced vaccine efficacy, so the ones against which the vaccine doesn't work as well. All of our modelling to date has been done on the Delta variant, so we know that that's something that we can cope with within our modelling strategy, but we're looking at what else could come in. So what we're hoping to do as we move forward incrementally is balance safety, risk assessment, but also with the proportionality and moving forward out of the pandemic. So I hope that's given you a summary of what the plans are. Thank you, Deputy Fairbrush.
Again, thank you very much, Dr. Brink. Questions, please. Yes.
Obviously, another big milestone change, Monday the 16th of August. Do you feel that the community are ready for that and that people are generally on board with that?
I think that's a very good question because that's exercised our mind. But what we've got to do is deal with it proportionately. I know that's an overused word, but it appears in the statute. Every decision we make has got to be proportionate. And the decision we've made is that the UK have gone ahead now for wider. It's not only Europe, it's the USA. We're not happy. Dr. Brink isn't happy yet with the certifications from the USA. We are happy with Europe and with the Europe and EFTA, and I've explained what EFTA is. Something I learned when I did economics all those years ago. But in relation to that, we're happy with those. And again, they're not exercising the blue channel. They have got to do the day 1 test and the day 7 test, or whatever it's called. We're not allowed to say day 0 and day 7, but anyway, it's got to do that test, and they've got to wait for a negative test. So, as Dr. Brink tells me so many times in the conversations we've had over the last 9 or 10 months, nothing can be perfect, nothing can be 100% sure, but we're as sure as we can be that this is the best way forward. But of course, I mentioned the phrase Fortress Guernsey when I was speaking. Some people, and I can understand it because we've been the way we have now, for 17 months or thereabouts. Some people, it's not a comfort zone. They feel protected if we are very, very restricted. We just don't feel we can do that going forward. Dr. Brink.
I think it's absolutely right that we justify our decision-making to the population, which is why we're sitting here today and why I've produced this wheel, because particularly if you look at the minimisation of the introduction of variants of concern, so having that PCR and sequencing capacity to look at any viruses that are detectable at our at our borders from outside the common travel area. But I think you're absolutely right. We need to justify our decisions and we need to explain the decision-making process. But moving forward incrementally, I think, is the right thing to do. And it's what we've always done. We've taken a next step carefully. We'll monitor the effect, see what our population feedback is, but also see if there's any enhanced risk associated with that, and then move on to the next step. But justifying it and explaining it is absolutely appropriate.
Indeed. Anybody else? Okay.
Do you know why there's a delay in the LFTs coming into Guernsey? Because Jersey's got hundreds of them.
Sorry?
The lateral flow tests.
We've been every single day, because they were due to arrive on Friday. They didn't arrive on Friday, so every single day since then, including up to about half an hour ago, we were checking, where are they? We now know precisely where they are, and we anticipate they'll be here in the next couple of days, but that's the best we can do.
Can I just add one other thing, is that the lateral flow test is part of our surveillance programme. We have plenty of those on Ireland, but the lateral flows that you have to give out at the border are specific individual packs with individual buffers, and that's part of the infection control hygiene that we need to do with regard to giving a product out. But our lateral flow surveillance programme on Ireland carries on, and there's not a shortage of the bulk packs, for want of a better word.
Those best laid plans have gone awry, but through no fault of anybody on this side of the water, because we've been constantly chasing. But people may have seen on their televisions and heard on their radios about the empty shelves in supermarkets in the UK over the weekend because of the supply chain is just chock-a-block. Anybody else with a question?
Matthew Leach, Bailiwick Express. Last time we were here, you raised concerns that a disproportionate amount of 18 to 30-year-olds had not come forward for a vaccine. Has this changed at all since your last concerns were raised?
So we're having walk-in clinics and they've been well attended, so we're pleased with that response, but we now need to analyse the data and look at how that translates into actual numbers. But yes, we've been pleased with the response to the walk-in clinics, and I think it suits people who may, for example, work shifts or irregular hours that they are available to go on a particular day.
I think we still all need to be, and it's not just the young, vigilant. You've seen the statistics. There's still, 81 point something, and whatever it is, point something adds up to 92%. So it'd be nice to get it a bit higher if we can. That's not a criticism of anybody. I think in relation to the hospitality sector, we're saying as well to employers in the hospitality sector that, and there are quite a lot of young people employed in the hospitality sector, encourage your employees to get their vaccinations and to be double vaccinated, because of course they've got contact with the public all the time in restaurants and hotels, etc. But again, that's encouragement, and we're sure employers will do that. Yes, Matthew.
You mentioned the benefits of being vaccinated, fully vaccinated and unvaccinated when it comes to being contact traced. How many people are in self-isolation who are unvaccinated and have been contact traced?
Who are unvaccinated and contact trace? We've got about 91 people in self-isolation today. So that's a figure. We had about another 10 or 15 interviews that we still had to do when I last looked at the figures this morning. I haven't got, most of those will be unvaccinated individuals, because vaccinated individuals won't be in self-isolation unless they have chosen to bubble permanently with a positive case, and that's very few. So those will be unvaccinated or partially vaccinated individuals.
As you say, best laid plans can go awry. Is it a little bit embarrassing, though, that these lateral flow tests haven't arrived yet?
Well, I don't think we could be, because we were assured that they would be here. And they're coming from the UK, they're coming from a very reputable supplier. But of course, I wish I wasn't saying what I've just said, and I wish they were here. But I don't feel we could have done any more other than send, a boat or a plane or a railway, an engine or something to go and get them. And we were assured they would be here. But as I say, they've been tracked because, we've all ordered parcels, and we know it's in Scunthorpe or Peterborough or wherever it is. We know where it is, and we're taking active steps to get them here as soon as we can. But I wish they were here. Anybody else with a question? Matthew?
One last one for me. I think I've asked this before, just an update on the long COVID study and whether or not there's any more information about that.
No, we don't have any more information, but that is coming to something that we need to focus on. I absolutely take your point. We do need to focus on that. We've just been focusing on a lot of other things at the moment. But yes, it is something we need to analyse and have a look at. Dr. Raby has set up a long COVID multidisciplinary clinic, so the GPs have a place that they can refer complex patients in, and a lot of patients are going to be managed in primary care.
Any other questions from anybody?
When do you think United States visitors might be allowed in as Category 2 visitors?
I think that's a difficult question. I'm looking to Dr. Brink. I think that's a difficult question to answer, because my understanding is that the certification that's been accepted by the UK, it's a bit of a mismatch, really, isn't it? Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I think what we'll do is we'll look at it incrementally. So what we want to do is get the European certification accepted and then move to the next step. And it might be that we have to look at what is being, globally they'll be developing standards. So I think it is such a fast-moving field, and indeed things are moving literally on a daily basis. So I would say as soon as the vaccination certification was acceptable to the vaccination certification team, which is not something that I personally do, but as soon as they have the certification that they're happy with, we'd look to moving forward. But in the meantime, what we can do is introduce the European Union and wider European community certification to take the next step forward. What we want to do is keep moving forward.
It's a question for the BBC, who weren't able to be here today, but they've sent in a question asking about testing in Alderney and whether there are delays currently to testing results, because they've heard from an Alderney resident that they've had to wait 72 hours for their test result.
Yeah, so there were delays and testing from Alderney this weekend. It was due to the delay of the transport of or transit of samples over to Guernsey, not a delay in the testing in the Guernsey laboratory. And that's been looked at by the States of Alderney. I've emailed the States of Alderney today.
Anybody else?
Just going back to the Jersey restrictions, I think you said from tomorrow they can do a PCR test or a lateral flow test. I was just quite surprised about that, because it sounds almost a sort of weakening of those restrictions.
Well, not really, because we've accepted, we would have done if we'd had them, the lateral flow tests here tomorrow. People will go to their hotel or their home and process them over a period of days. We don't think it is, because we believe, in fact, we were having discussions about whether we should just blue channel them, if you understand what I mean by that. And we came to this, it's not a compromise, we came to a decision based on the advice that we received, and it was our judgment, it was the judgment of the politicians to take this interim step. Is there anything you want to add, Dr.
No, it's an interim step, and I think, again, we need to move forward, so it's an interim step whilst we move to the next level.
Anybody else with a question? No, sorry.
Well,
That's
one
okay.
more.
That's okay.
I was just reflecting back, because the 1st of July, so we're a month on from that other big change, and there were quite a lot of doom-mongers around at that time, but cases have actually been pretty low, haven't they? Although obviously we've had this announcement of a death over the weekend, and that's tragic for that family. But do you feel sort of, for want of a better word, vindicated by the figures?
Well, let me deal with that, I think, rather, because it's a political question rather than. I think we feel that we made the right decision. But when we've got decisions wrong, we've put our hands up and apologised and said, we've made the right decision. Dr. Brink's slide showed 50 active cases currently. You compare that with other jurisdictions, you could multiply that by many. But you can never be, that's not to say they've got it wrong, but I think we've got it right. But all our decisions are kept under review almost daily. Dr. Brink speaks to us and we speak to her very, very regularly, and we've had so many CCA meetings recently, it's almost a disappointment we don't have a day without one, but we're not going to have one tomorrow. So it really is, I think we made the right decision, and those that said that we were wrong, I think they were wrong, but there's no crowing over that. But I'm glad we've made that decision, because our community, I'm going into a real long spiel now, aren't I? But our community needs to move forward. We need to ease out of this situation, and sometimes it might be 2 foot forward and 1 foot back, but we want to be in a position whereby in a few months' time there are as few restrictions, if any, that are necessary so that people can live as normal a life as they can. But Dr. Brink has told me we've got this virus with us in our community, in the world, for years to come. We've got to live with it.
Yeah. And I think that's important. We are going to live with SARS-CoV-2, the virus that caused COVID-19, in an endemic way. So the virus is going to be with us for years to come. I think we've done well so far, but we could still see an outbreak. We could see a wave of infection. But how we've modelled it is we've modelled it against an increasingly vaccinated population. So our population is increasingly protected. So we've looked really, this month has been key to us because so many more of our population become vaccinated during that period of time. And I think only time will tell where we eventually end up.
Okay, anybody else, anything else? Well, thank everybody for their attendance. Thank people for listening, and enjoy Guernsey and the Bailiwick of Guernsey as much to enjoy. Thank you very much.